This is the Weigh-In podcast by Benoit Chestnut and normally Sebastian Romero, but he will return at some point. On this week's Weigh-In, man. On this week's Weigh-In, we got a lot of juicy news here. I call it juicy because we got Keyshawn Davis fight canceled. We're gonna break that down for you. We got Kayla Harrison, Olympic Olympic medalist, and now UFC champion. And we just got Sean O'Malley gets beat, not just beat, submitted. So we got that to break down. And then we just got a lot everywhere. We got Vasily Lomachenko, Loma retiring. That's another thing we have. We just got a lot of stuff everywhere. So if we get it correct the way it is, as I always tell you guys, we like to get it correct. So Kayla Harrison, 2-time gold medalist in judo. So that's that. But nonetheless, this is this week's weigh-in. And let's just jump right in for our boxing fans because we got a lot of them. We'll start y'all off first this week. Keyshawn Davis. So if we're gonna jump into what happened and all of that with the Davis incident, so I'm gonna get you that. I wrote down some notes for that. So let me go ahead and take a look at them. So the fight was canceled after Davis failed to make weight, and then they made Abdullah Mason the main event, which he performed. Abdullah Mason performed. Keyshawn is going to be stripped of his WBO. Yep, he's going to be stripped of his WBO for missing weight. Y'all all know if you miss weight, you forfeit your belt. So that's one that has for that. So if you bought for Davis and that and you were upset, I would definitely try to get your refund. That's what everything says. But nonetheless, nonetheless, Davis missed weight. That's just absolutely, in terms of, missing weight, I guess, today's going to be on that weight talk, that weight, as I like to say, that weight reduction. When you're world champ, I feel like that's the most important piece right there is you can't get on the scale and not make weight. A good fighter like Keyshawn, no reason why he should be stripped of his belt. And that's no fault to the commish. That's no fault to anybody else. That's faults of his own. Keyshawn know better than that. He know better than getting in there and doing something like that. I feel like he know better. I feel like he know a lot better. I feel like, that it ain't right, You gotta get yourself right. You can't come up and miss weight. You can't be missing weight. So he was 4.3 pounds over. 4 pounds. 4 pounds. I know to a lot of you guys that might not look like a lot, but that's why the fight was canceled. Everybody learned from the Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney situation. If your guy overweight, you don't have to still do the fight. But what we learned is, regardless of whether you're regardless of whether the fight goes on, you're overweight. So by commission, I believe rules or so, your belt is stripped. You miss weight, your belt's stripped. So if you're overweight, you're gonna get your belt stripped. I kind of feel like you the champ. I can understand the opponent doing it and being like, hey, listen, like I don't care much to want to win the belt, but for the champ to do it, you got to get yourself together, man. You can't be going through not making weight. You can't be not making the weight. You gotta make weight. I kind of feel like you gotta make your weight. That's a huge Debbie Downer right there. You gotta make your weight. Like I said, brother was supposed to make his weight, and he really didn't. And I can understand. You know, I kind of feel like this. When you coming up on the week, you're supposed to be fight week. It's the week of fight week. Your weight should be like you should have made all that weight the week before so you could adjust properly instead to make it. And I understand some guys is cutting heavy, but you 4 pounds. Come on, come on, come on, Keyshawn, come on. You know, come on. So that's just that, and I just and with the thoughts of how that weight class is shaking up, let's break it down for you guys because there's definitely going to be a breakdown. Loma retired, so that belt's open, and Keyshawn just messed himself up by missing weight. So you got two belts that are up for grabs right now. Two belts, man. I'm telling you, somebody gonna be undisputed. Somebody gonna be undisputed because you got two of them you can snatch. Now, another thing that's going around since we're on that weight class, everybody's talking about should Tank defend his belt like he wants to in a unification bout, or should he fight Jake Paul? And I'm gonna say the same thing that some of them were saying when they were asked about it. I believe it was Keyshawn that was asked about it. Um, I believe I believe it was Keyshawn that was asked about it. That said, that's a good thing to do. Let me see who said it. Let me see. I'm gonna get it for y'all. I'm gonna get it for y'all. Let me see if I can get it for y'all. I think it was Keyshawn. I'm not really sure at the present time. But if we stuck along into it, they said that the eyes that are gonna be brought to the sport from a Tank Davis, Jake Paul, and I agree. I'm gonna agree with that statement because it's true. There are gonna be a lot of eyes that come to the sport for this Tank Davis, Jake Paul. It's gonna be huge. It's gonna be huge. It's gonna be a huge thing from this Jake Paul Tank Davis. That's what I'm saying. It's gonna be a good one. That's why I think it's gonna be real good. Um. Oh. Oh. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I'm looking for y'all right now. I'm looking for where I saw it so that I could accurately best provide you guys the answers you seek. But yeah, it was. I agree with the statement that it for sure is something that be really good. That's for sure something. That's for sure something that'll be really, really good. That's something I look at and I'm like, okay, it was Keyshawn. It was Keyshawn Davis. I got it for y'all. It was Keyshawn Davis. So what I was getting at here is that, he's right. Keyshawn right. It's gonna bring a lot of eyes to the sport. I understand it's gonna delay Tank from unifying, them from snatching them belts. But the eyes that we're gonna bring when Tank snatches those belts is gonna be a lot of people that are gonna want to see that, because you understand you're gonna get two types of people. You're gonna get people that love Tank because he goes in and he provides these knockouts. We're not gonna talk about Lamont Roach. We've already been over that on this podcast. We all know what happened. So we talk about all those other fights where he was able to perform very well. So when we look at Tank, Tank is he's still Tank Davis. He's still big boy. He's still it. I'm gonna say this lightly because it's lightly. Jake Paul ain't no Jake Paul ain't no Lamont Roach. And I mean that. You're not no Lamont Roach. You know, you're not that party crasher that's gonna come in and say, "Hey, I'm gonna do this." Everybody knows who Jake is, and I say that because I felt like Tank didn't take that Lamont Roach serious, but I think he gonna take you serious, Jake. Everybody know how many guys you put on the canvas. He gonna take Jake serious. So I feel like this Jake Paul Tank Davis is really good. Although Tank is putting off, a unification would be putting off possible unification bout. I still think it's a good idea. I think, you know, as Mayweather would like the silencing of Jake Paul, the humbling of Jake Paul. Jake thinks that he can come in and beat everybody, but we keep getting failed negotiations. And I'm going to give Jake some credit here. They reached out and they sent KSI a contract. They sent KSI a contract. They did. So KSI now started running. I said, "Oh, I don't know what happened, but we keep trying. We're not getting KSI Jake Paul. Listen, KSI, if you know you're gonna lose, if you do, not saying he says he's gonna lose. I'm not saying he is. I'm not providing my opinion on that fight. I'm just saying if he knows he's gonna lose, bro, don't keep running. Give us what we want. Go stand up and get beat. But if you running because you're trying to take other fights, you're trying to prepare yourself for Jake, now that I can't say nothing to, because that's smart. I'm gonna tell you why. Because now you're gaining experience. So when you do get in there with Jake, it's gonna be a good duel. That is the on as terms of what is never talked about on here. WWE. They had the Cody Rhodes finish the story. This essentially is the story. That Jake Paul KSI. I would relate it to Mayweather Pacquiao. Many might not agree with me with that, but I relate that to Mayweather Pacquiao. Everybody wanted Mayweather Pacquiao for a long time. Now you're gonna get Jake Paul. Now for YouTube, the YouTube boxers. I call them the YouTube boxers. People that started boxing because the YouTubers were boxing and came over. You're gonna get. You've been wanting KSI Jake Paul because KSI beat first time tied with Logan, then beat Logan. And everybody always wanted Jake to come in there and do his day of reckoning and avenge the loss of his brother. And if you're asking my opinion, I'm sorry, I'm going to be with my brother Jake here. I think he's got enough skill to go in there, and I'm not going to say, no, I am going to say he could demolish KSI. I don't think it's going to be close. KSI thinks he's got it. You're not on Jake Paul's level the same way Canelo says Jake's not on his level. And same way Tank could say and should say Jake is not on his level. But either way, I think KSI is not on Jake's level. Man, you're not. You're not. I understand you're doing your thing. You're doing what you do, but Jake's not. Let's look at Jake. Let's look at how much KSI's feet is in other stuff. You know what I mean? Like all this other stuff. When we look at Jake, how often is Jake's feet in other stuff? And I mean that by like how often is he like? I get he's got bet on. That's sports betting. I get he's got MVP, but again, that's around boxing, the sport he's currently doing. So you kind of say to yourself, what is Jake doing? So if we go ahead and we jump on over and we find that Jake Paul YouTube channel. Watch this. We're gonna find that Jake Paul YouTube channel. Jake Paul. We're gonna break down Jake Paul. We're gonna break down that Paul. You look at when we talk about Jake Paul. How often does he post? His last video was 3 months ago, then 6 months ago, then 6 months ago again. So, 7 months ago, when you look at Jake, he's not trying to pump out YouTube videos anymore. I know everybody calls him the YouTuber. This isn't even daily videos anymore. This is a guy who has changed his aspect to boxing, 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 boxing. Jake is all about boxing right now. He's not about that YouTube game anymore because he's about the boxing money he makes and all this other stuff. Is KSI like that? Is KSI hungry, stuck in the gym? Like, always in the gym, always trying to line up everything he can. Like Tank Davis? You're lining up Tank Davis? Like, is that not another way to challenge yourself? So I think, you know, nonetheless, and don't get me wrong, KSI did line up a good fight. He fought Tommy Fury. I don't know what's going on with Tommy because Jake had a good fight against Tommy too. So Tommy is do I think Tommy's up there? No, I think when KSI fought Tommy, I thought it was a sloppy fight for KSI. I seen better, So that's one thing I'm like, is Tommy up there? No, no. So they both fought Tommy, but we got to see something better. I think Jake's gonna provide himself the better resume due to him fighting. If it goes down, Tank Davis. If it, I hope it goes down that Tank Davis. That Tank Davis fight we gonna get, because that's gonna be real interesting. That Tank Davis, I like it. 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 Now I'm gonna tell you why too, because Jake gonna get shit. I mean, Jake gonna get it done. Jake gonna get it done. Jake gonna get it done. In terms of KSI, not in terms of Tank Davis. Let's not mistake in that. But that is a little of that in the boxing. That it's some wild stuff. The way you can draw their matchups, it is gonna be wild. Depending on how you draw them, like trust me, the way we said this that at Tank's weight, the potential clashing that could go on. I'm gonna be honest. The clashing that could go on, because we got Loma that just retired. We got Keyshawn that just got his belt stripped. The clashing is still good, bro. Loma can still come out of retirement to fight Davis, but nonetheless, who would have ever thought this was how it was going to play out? We would have never guessed this, but you know, that was that. And if we stumble over to this UFC, this shifts with the UFC. Kayla Harrison, if you didn't see, man, Kayla Harrison got it done. Got it done. When I tell you she got it done, she got it done. There was no other. Man, I was sitting there watching the fight, and I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, there ain't no better way. And Juliana Pena to get submitted and talks about, Juliana Pena was talking about, oh, the last Olympian I had, I took care of business. We talked about this before on here. We did. What did we say? Believe you can be beat. Believe the person can beat you. And Juliana Pena thought she's untouchable. No. No. Nope. You're not. That's what he said. Had she gone in there and said, okay, I think she can beat me. I know she's gonna beat me. Now let me fight that like that. Like, hey, I gotta come in here and prove. But she didn't, lost by Kumora. And Kayla Harrison joins the only other Olympian to have a UFC belt, Henry Cejudo. So, that's an elite club that is very small. Not too many. There's only two in there as of now, because Kayla Harrison just got the UFC title. And it's one thing. We yeah, this is something we're gonna talk about. When you talk trash, we talk about, and I always call it the Conor McGregor, the McGregor. When you do what Conor does, Conor, or Conor, you do what Conor does. Like when he went in against Jose Aldo, he says, "I'm gonna beat you. I'm gonna beat you." Everybody said, "Oh, you're talking too much." He went in there. He did what he was gonna do. I get he said he was gonna beat Khabib. He didn't. I get he said he was gonna beat Mayweather. He didn't. But you know, early career McGregor would say, "I'm gonna do something," and he did it. And I'm talking before he started getting himself in all that trouble. You know what I mean? Like, prime McGregor. That's what I'm talking about. Juliana Pena gets in here like, "Oh, you can't." I took down, you know, so many people to win this belt. I finally got a belt, and now I'm better than you think, and to just sit here and say, hey, that it's untouchable, you know, I get it. You beat Amanda Nunes. I get it. I get you were able to get the belt. Or you know what? Let me fact check myself on that one. But I get you were able to like win the belt. But to go and sit there and think that you were unbeatable because the last Olympian couldn't do it. Every fight is not the same. Every game plan's different. Every fight is different. So, you know, every fight's different. And I kind of feel like when you sit here and you talk about that, you know, when you talk about, doing things like that, you talk about a lot of that stuff, and you talk about when you talk about that stuff, you talk about it being at the way it is. So fact checked, submit to Mandy Nunes, and feels like, okay, I'm the top of the totem. I know what I'm doing. I got that ground game. This is the mistake. Kayla Harrison was a 2-time Olympic jiu-jitsu judo world champion. Olympic champion. If that doesn't tell you anymore that you should not be on the ground with her, that you're not going to win that ground game. That is an Olympic champion, the elite of the elite in judo. You're not going to get on the ground and be able to do what you think. You're not going to submit her. It's not possible. I mean, it's possible, but this is an Olympic champion. The likelihood you submit an Olympic champion in jiu-jitsu, I can understand, it's possible if it's a wrestling, they're not, it's possible, but slim if it was a wrestling, or if it was, it's more possible if it was a boxing Olympic champion. You say, okay, you submit a boxing Olympic champion. That's got nothing to do with really ground game, but jiu-jitsu and wrestling are the two where I say you're not going to submit those people. They have a outstanding ground game. And for her to think, let me go to the ground with Kayla, huge mistake. Huge mistake. Huge. Like, not a small one, a huge mistake. Should have never gone to the ground. Never. And I say that because that's just a mistake she made. And, you have to look at your opponent's accolades and say they have the ability to beat me. If you're going up against a 2-time judo Olympic champion, then you need to sit there and say, wait a minute, you have the ability to beat me. Let me hold on here. I don't want to go to the ground with you. Let me try to stand it up. Instead to get Kumored on the ground, you should have never been on the ground. This is a jiu-jitsu judo world champion, So I kind of feel like that's just something that's like, come on. I mean, a judo Olympic champion. That's just something that you're like, come on. That's not something you should be doing. It's just not, in any terms of way, it's not something that you should do at all. It's just not something that, and that's why I sit there and I'm like, come on, come on. That's just something that I'm like, come on, So that's kind of why I say that the way I did, the way I do. But nonetheless, Sean O'Malley, Sugar Shane, he got beat, also submitted. So, when I look at what happened with O'Malley, I look at, what in terms of happened with O'Malley, I look at that and say, hey, that's an interesting, that's an interesting one, in terms of what happened. And I say that because he got beat. I know Conor McGregor was rooting for him to get his revenge, but it did not happen. It did not happen. So with that being said, that is this week's weigh-in. So, like, comment, subscribe, share, because we in the end, and please do. This is the weigh-in by Benoit Chestnut, and normally Sebastian Romero, but he will return at some point. And just great to provide another episode for you guys, for the fans. Weigh in, out.